Hi, everyone. This is Tatiana Judias hosting Thrive and Shine. This is another episode on conscious leadership, authentic power, and embodying these principles in our everyday life and in our leadership. Every episode is brought to you with so much love and so much presence because we are enjoying every single one of our guests who takes the time to show up and be authentically present with our show. So today I have Raj Sisodia. Raj Sisodia, I met in an interesting way. We were not connected at all, but we actually were in the presence of one another at this Shakti leadership event that I joined in San Diego. This is a sisterhood of Shakti leaders that I joined, and I am so proud to be part of. Nilima Bhatt, who was on our show, is actually the co-author of Shakti Leadership that Raj and Nilima wrote. And so this book caught my attention. The movement, the leadership group caught my attention, and I joined them. And in joining them, of course, I met Raj. So Raj, welcome.
Thank you, Tatiana. Really happy to be with
you. Isn't it fun to have such applause?
Audience, okay.
So before I continue asking you all the questions that I'm so excited to ask you today, I want to describe a little bit who you are, what you do to our audience. You are a thought leader of the Conscious Capitalism movement. Raj is the F.W. Olin Distinguished Professor of Global Business and Whole Foods Market Research Scholar in Conscious Capitalism at Babson College. Am I correct so far?
Yes.
Okay, because you have an impressive list of titles. You are also the co-founder and co-chairman of Conscious Capitalism, Inc., and a published author, and you speak internationally on conscious capitalism. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And I know that our sisters are all watching today, our Shakti sisters. And of course, I love this subject of conscious leadership. This is a subject that is dear to my heart. It's dear to my life. This is something that I thrive to embody more and more every day. As you said earlier, before we got on the air, we were chatting and we were talking about the fact that this ascension in conscience or in consciousness never ends. I mean, it, as we always say, my daughter and I, it doesn't have a pause button. And where we are today doesn't mean that we will, be at tomorrow. It keeps on going. So tell me a little bit about you and how the world and the universe brought you into this world.
Yes, I think it's interesting. We can make sense of our life only looking back and connecting the dots, and a seemingly random set of events that happened over time ultimately all added up to being able to be in the right place at the right time to be able to do what you're meant to do, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So for me, I had a very unusual childhood, growing up, first of all, in India, in a very unique subculture within India until the age of 7. Really part of this very feudal, very patriarchal, hyper-masculine, almost misogynistic sort of subsect, which is sort of the warrior class, And growing up in that and seeing all of the consequences of that way of being in the world, the impact on people, the impact on people who work in the farm, the impact on women, the children, etc. So I got that sort of experience early on until the age of 7. And then my father, meanwhile, had gone away to Canada to get his PhD. So he had kind of escaped the confines of that little village. And being a brilliant student, had gone on to get his bachelor's and master's and ultimately a PhD in agriculture science, and was in Canada. So I didn't actually know him until I was 7. So I was in this hyper masculine patriarchal system, but only with my mother as a parent. Right?
Interesting. Interesting dichotomy, actually, between what was on the outside and what was on the inside.
Exactly. So the masculine, feminine, that polarity played up very prominently. But my father came back when I was 7, and then we moved to Barbados. He got a job there working on sugarcane research. So suddenly I'm transported from this rural village type environment in India, and we're all the way across the world. In Barbados for 2 years. Then he got a job in California, so we were in Salinas, California for 2 years, and then in Canada, where he became a professor at the university where he got his PhD. So we got all these experiences, and then when I was about 12 years old, I decided we're going back to India. Right, so I had these 5 years out in the West, and then back to India, and kind of India hadn't moved very much in those 5 years, right? So
And
it was still.
what made you want to go back to India at that
Well, it
day?
wasn't me; it was my father's decision, right? And
Oh,
really,
it was still your father's. Okay, I understood
yeah,
that maybe
I
you
was
were
not
young.
even
Okay.
12, right?
Okay.
And it was my father's decision, and I think it really came from his father. His father wanted him to come back, So we come
Patriarchy.
from this line of extremely strong patriarchal fathers.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
you do what the father tells you. So we
Yeah.
went back, and then now I kind of, having spent 5 years abroad, I kind of have these outsider lens, you know, in California in the late 60s, when you had Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King and man landing on the moon, pretty momentous times. Riots in Chicago and Detroit, the Vietnam War and the peace movement, and it was tumultuous times in America. So experiencing all of that and then going back to India and back into that feudal culture, I could see that with an outsider lens. I could
Do
say,
you
wow.
what do you remember sensing as a younger child from that could be a
Well,
bridge between then and now? Like I think we all have like seeds of our own consciousness that we can pick up with time, and we go back and we're like, oh my God, I remember
yes.
feeling that or thinking that. So what do you remember from those seeds?
Yeah, I just remember seeing things and hearing things and experiencing things in our village with my grandfather, my uncles, and others, which were just incredibly abusive and harsh and misogynistic. It was just the opposite of my own nature, right? The way I was perhaps born, and also the way I was impacted by my mother. And I could be horrified at things that my cousins and uncles just took for granted. You know,
Ah,
I mean,
interesting.
literally, if there's somebody who worked for us who did something wrong, my cousin would tie him to a tree and whip him, right? I mean, it's like slavery, and these would happen routinely, and he just did it like that's what you're supposed to do when somebody does that. So,
Right.
but I could see all of that and react to it in a very different way, and so
Mm.
all of that was part of my psyche and understanding that this is not how it should be, right? But somehow this is the society in which I was born. And
Mm-hmm.
I became very sensitized to the abuses of that, right? The hypermasculine
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Women had no power and really no voice. And so eventually, then I finished my high school and I went to engineering because that's what you did if you were good in math and science. There weren't very many options. And then I went to business school because that gave you a better job and double the salary of an engineering degree. And you got to work with air conditioning in your office.
Oh,
I
how
don't know what
exciting.
factories were where. And then I kind of accidentally became a business professor because I had a job lined up. I was finishing my MBA, but then I came down for breakfast one day and a group of my friends were dressed up and going somewhere. And I said, where are you guys going? We don't have any classes today. They said, we're going to the US Information Agency to get GMAT applications. I said, why do you need that? We're doing our MBA here. They said, we want to apply for a PhD in business. I said, I didn't know you can get a PhD in business. I said, give me 5 minutes, I'll change and I'll come with you guys, right? And the irony is that out of those 8 of us, I'm the only one who ends up coming here to it.
No way.
And that's how my life completely changed. And the reason I
In a
did that,
moment, imagine you had no idea.
no plan,
And
no idea.
of course you didn't plan it because you had
Yeah,
no idea, and your friends show up and you're the only one out of 8 people who actually got it. Like, that is not coincidence.
exactly. So, but because I had no plan to become a professor, I guess this was just a way to come to the US, okay? And I got a full scholarship to Columbia and Michigan and Cornell, and I ended up coming to Columbia, right? So now it was an all expenses paid way to come to the US because I had lived here as a kid and I did want to come back. I didn't know how, right? But then I became a business professor, but because of the way in which I came to that, I still had the skeptical outsider perspective, right?
Hmm.
And I got a PhD
Wait,
in marketing because I didn't like finance, but it's not because I loved marketing. In fact, I had a lot of,
it's interesting how you describe your path,
yeah,
because to me it's like the antithesis of where you are today. today you are all about consciousness and conscious leadership. And it sounds like your path was completely not conscious. It was completely out of default.
Yes, it was opportunistic. I just took the next best opportunity in front of me.
That's so fascinating how it led you to this point.
But in a way, if you believe in synchronicity, I was kind of being guided on the path and being given a set of experiences, right?
Yeah.
That would prime me to be able to do more meaningful work later.
Exactly.
Because in the moment, that work was not meaningful. My degree in marketing, I didn't respect my own profession. I thought marketing, is a lot of misleading people, getting them to buy stuff they don't need necessarily, making them feel inadequate or incomplete if they don't have certain things, etc. And I discovered at one point most of my work was focused on the inefficiency, the ineffectiveness, and the lack of ethics in marketing.
So you must have been very appreciated and liked in your field.
That was Dr. No, here comes Raj, who hates marketing, who's a marketing professor.
That's hilarious.
And remember, I came from that patriarchal system, so I'm always trying to impress my father and please the father. And my father used to say, my son is a professor of marketing. He was kind of amused. Like, what is marketing? Right? And my inner dialogue was, my father got a PhD in plant science because he wanted to cure world hunger. And I got a PhD in marketing so I can sell more potato chips. I have no respect.
Brilliant, Raj. I'm sure you did not share that view with your father.
I did not, but I really felt it, So I have this sort
That's hilarious.
Lack of, forget about pride. I almost had self-loathing.
Yes, yeah, I can.
What I did for a living. And the culmination of 10 years of that research showing how bad things were and how much we were wasting money. And I realized in 2004, we did a study where we found we were spending $1 trillion on marketing that year in America. And that was equal to the GDP of India.
Oh my God.
That just stopped me in my tracks. I said, how is it that 1.1 billion people can survive on what we're spending on ads, coupons, and junk mail?
Yeah.
Right? And we better be getting a lot for that $1 trillion. What are we getting?
Yeah, if that's not going to wake you up, I don't know what will.
So what are we getting for customers, companies, and society? And the answer on each of those was nothing or not much. 85% of American customers don't trust marketing. If it's marketing, it's not real. It's not true, right? Companies get a terrible return. 99% of ads are never noticed. 99.5% of coupons are never used, etc. And what's the impact on society? And I said, it's actually causing more problems. Yeah, it's stimulating extra consumption, right? But it's not making people happier or healthier, right? Physically or emotionally, right? And we use women's bodies, for example, to sell products. And what does that do? There's a lot of research on that. What does that do to eating disorders, depression, body dysmorphia? Right? Yet we have no conscience. Right? We think we can just do that. And there are consequences. $1 trillion does buy an impact on the psyche of people and on the culture, but mostly negative. So all of that led to me putting together a book proposal called The Shame of Marketing. Okay. I mean, I was literally going to write a book. We should all be ashamed of what we're doing here.
You were on a mission.
Yes, but I was stuck in that negative space. And my mentor, who I was going to author the book with, said to me, Raj, in America, people would rather hear about the solution and not the problem.
Yeah, true.
It was such a wake-up call because I had been stuck in that negative place of describing the problem.
But not offering the solutions that go with the...
Right. So, okay, we believe that companies spend a ton of money and yet have lousy customer satisfaction, customer loyalty is plummeting, customer trust has declined even further, even as spending has gone up. Then what's the opposite of that? Right? So I just turned that book around. I called it In Search of Marketing Excellence. And I said, okay, let's look for companies that don't spend much money on marketing and yet their customers love them and are loyal and trusting towards them. So what are they doing and how can we learn from them? And with that simple lens, we started to find a bunch of companies. Whole Foods was one of the first ones that came across our radar. Whole Foods
Which one? Oh, Whole Foods, yes.
Whole Foods, right? So they were spending 90% less than the industry average.
90% less.
Yes.
Interesting.
They didn't have a chief marketing officer. They didn't have an ad agency. And most of what they spent, 90% of what they spent was at the store level, not at headquarters. And 90% of that was community activities. So that's how they thought about marketing. It's almost an afterthought. But what they did do was look after the well-being of their customers.
Yes.
on selling them as much stuff as possible, but educating them and bringing them the best possible products as well as advice and information, right? And they also did that for their customers, but also employees, right? They treated their employees.
Right. And that was part of his definition of what Whole Food, or the mission of Whole Food from the get-go, was really to bring quality food, creating a quality environment, with quality people, and so on and so forth. It had meaning for once. It had meaning.
Right. So we discovered, so Whole Foods and a bunch of other companies, we discovered that not only did customers love them and were loyal and trusting, employees loved them as well, because they treated employees well with respect and dignity and paid them well and gave them good benefits. Suppliers were loyal to them. Communities embraced them, right? So they were really embedded in the stakeholder mindset. They wanted to create value for everybody. They weren't just looking to extract money from the wallets of customers and pay employees as little as possible and squeeze your suppliers and then make as much money as you can for the shareholders. Value for everybody. And the second thing is what brought all their stakeholders together was a set of shared values and a common purpose. So for Whole Foods, everybody connected to that enterprise believes in that what you put into your body makes a difference to your health and the health of the food system and the health of the planet, right? So that's why you want to
it's a whole ecological system from
that's why you want to
A to Z.
Right. So you want to work there for that reason because you believe that. You want to buy from them for that reason. You want to supply to them. You want to invest in them, etc. Right. So they had a higher purpose. And the idea of higher purpose in our lives, right? All of us, everybody going through the Shakti program, right? The third part is what is your unique contribution, your purpose in this time. So every business needs to have its own higher purpose too. So we discovered through that research, which was looking for just marketing excellence, we discovered a much bigger story. It's like we went looking for a small thing, but we discovered this whole cave of wonders of all this whole alternative way of being in business and in life, right? With higher purpose, with a stakeholder mindset, with leaders who actually care about the people and care about the purpose. They're not in it just for their ego or money or power, right? And a culture where people actually look forward to going to work, where they have meaning and purpose, where they have respect and dignity, where they have safety and love and care, right? So those became the elements. That book was published ultimately as Ferns of Endearment, How World-Class Companies Profit from Passion and Purpose. That came out in 2007. And we did the financial analysis at the end. This was very critical because up until that point, all the publishers and others we were showing the book proposal to us, this sounds very touchy-feely and nice, but these businesses are probably not able to compete in the world because they're too nice. They're too good to
Exactly. Yeah.
They're not, focusing relentlessly just on maximizing profits
they're not focusing on killing it, right?
Exactly, making a killing, destroying the, doing all of that, right?
All that warrior conversation.
Yeah. So when we selected all the companies based on their humanistic performance, right, on those dimensions, and at the end we said, okay, now let's look at their financials, and we think they'll be good because they're good companies and people like them, but they are paying their people more than they need to. Purely from what the market would bear. They are investing more in customer care. They're spending more on employee benefits. They're paying their suppliers more. They're paying taxes at a higher rate. They're investing in their communities. They're investing in the environment. Therefore, there's probably less money left over for investors because investors get paid last. Everybody else has to get paid first before the investors then get what's left. Right? And we said maybe that's okay because they're creating a lot of value for all these other people, right? So we have to look at the total value created, not just how much value is created for shareholders. Because you can create value for shareholders, you can be destroying the lives of your employees, damaging the health of your customers.
That's actually probably the easiest route.
Yeah, and that's the default way, right? You squeeze those places to
squeeze everything so that the one at the top or the ones at the top make the most money.
Right. And what we actually found was that these companies outperformed the overall market by a 9-to-1 ratio over a 10-year.
Wow.
Right. So
that's impressive.
1,025 versus 125% for the market as a whole. And that was stunning to us because I said, how is that possible? Like, are they printing money in the basement? Like, how is it, where are they getting this money from?
Where are they sneaking their results? Yeah.
And it turns out that you're creating a lot more value, right? People are more engaged, they're more passionate, they're more creative, they're doing wonderful things for customers. You're saving all that money on marketing. Remember, most of these companies don't have to spend money on marketing. They have very low employee turnover. They have very low legal costs, very low administrative costs. Customers love them. They get positive word of mouth. Everybody's loyal to them. Everybody wants to see them succeed.
So a question for you, is that still true today? Are the results comparing conscious capitalistic businesses, I guess I should specify, are their results compared to standard companies still outperforming?
Yes. So we did a second edition of Firms of Endearment in 2014.
Okay.
Right? We wanted to expand our research, get more companies, make it more global. So in the original book, we had 28 companies. In the new book, we have 73 on the 2014 edition. And we looked at performance over 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. And there's still dramatic outperformance. It was 7.7 times outperformance over a 20-year period for this largest set of companies.
While creating good, while creating more business, more meaning, and while adding value to the world and being part of that change we want to see in the world. Because I have had these conversations with people who are not conscious capitalist believers. I guess they're, I guess either novices in hearing about what this concept is all about, the reality of it too, and they are skeptics. And I find that always quite interesting to be talking to skeptics about this type of way to run a business and create more meaning and good in the world. I mean, how could it get any better? To me, it's like, you're making money so that your people are enjoying this part of this pie with you. I mean, everybody wins. The win-win situation that we always talk about, right? Within consciousness and business.
Yeah, so we say we need to do business in a way that everybody matters and everybody wins.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody Matters happens to be the title of another book that I wrote, where that was the guiding philosophy of that company, right? And the idea of businesses creating value, we as Muhammad Yunus said, we act like money is the only game in town. There are other games in town that matter in a human life, right? Not just about money. I mean, that would be a very distorted sense of what life is about. So we talk about that businesses create, but they can also destroy at least 8 kinds of value or wealth. So it's financial, but also intellectual capital, right? All the innovation and breakthroughs and patents and all of that. It's social capital, the kind of trust and cohesion that exists in a society depends a lot on the business sector. It's emotional well-being, operating from love and care in your life and not fear and stress. Which traditional businesses do. Heart attacks are 20% higher on Monday mornings. 120,000 extra deaths a year in America are due to the stress related to work. It's about spiritual well-being, having meaning and purpose in your life through your work. It's about the impact on the culture, what defines a good life, right? And all that marketing spending that we do distorts the definition of a good life. It's the impact on our bodies, physical well-being. It's the impact on the environment. So these are all the consequences of how we operate. And a conscious business actually tries to have a positive impact in all 8 areas for all their stakeholders, as long as they exist. And a traditional business says we're just about making money, and therefore everything else is a side effect. And as we know, side effects tend to be negative.
Yes.
And we accept that. But the reality is that there's no such thing on this planet called a side effect. We do things and there are effects. And all the effects matter. Just because you call it a side effect doesn't make it less important. Right? So this is about doing business with a spectrum of positive effects. And it can be done because we know it is being done. So we know it's possible.
Yeah.
But you have the intentionality to do it, right? And then the perseverance to see it through.
I think it takes, the belief in wanting to matter and create businesses that serve a bigger and better outcome for everyone, including the planet. But it takes that belief to begin with. It takes that drive to want to adhere to those, to that mentality. It's a mindset. I mean, you can't possibly have this mentality in your business and not carry it through your life. It all merges into one. It's like people who believe that they are one at home and another one at work. Well, I just can't understand that. You are one. We are one, all of us.
And I think this is where it ties into the Shakti leadership work that you're doing as well. Because what all of this reflects, the traditional way of doing business, is a hyper-masculine approach to business, where business is almost viewed as a form of war, right? It's a company doing battle with your companies. My employees are like my soldiers, and customers are like the prize that we win, and competitors are like the enemy. Right? And our language is suffused. I mean, the whole world of business borrowed almost everything from the world of the military.
Let's kill it. Don't shoot the messenger.
We're in the trenches, kill towards. Even the language of, well, first of all, the organizational form of hierarchy, right? Command and control as an approach to leadership, that all came from armies. Because those were the only large organizations that existed. So when companies were getting large, we borrowed all of that. But even strategy, tactics, operations, front lines, headquarters, staff, line, these are all military terms.
When did you actually become more aware that, I mean, it sounds like all the principles of conscious leadership and conscious business came prior to you than before understanding how the world is really so much based on patriarchy. So did you realize that at the same time, or did it come once you met with Nilima and decided to create the book? When did it come to your consciousness that this world is so patriarchal? I mean, besides the seeds, of course, of your childhood.
No, I definitely had it in my childhood. So I had that experience of what that looks like and feels like, right? The hyper-masculine, unbalanced or unmitigated. And I had been writing and observing in the early years of Conscious Capitalism, before I even met Nilima and before we started the book, that the rise of Conscious Capitalism reflects the rise of feminine values in society. Right? That these businesses are explicitly built on love and care, that they are built on the principles of inclusion, right? Everybody mattering, right? And we regard these as more feminine values, that these businesses embody a lot of positive, emotions that are acceptable in these environments. So I've been saying that there's a rise of feminine values that is happening in society in this century.
Definitely.
A number of, books and other things have come out on that, including the Athena doctrine, right? Which is subtitled How Women and the Men Who Think Like Them Will Rule the Future. They did 60,000 interviews and they found 30,000 were asking what is considered masculine, what is considered feminine, and 30,000 asking what are the traits of good leadership, and then correlating the data and finding a strong correlation with the so-called feminine and what the qualities of good leadership are considered by people today, and also a strong correlation between the feminine and ethics and morality, and also between the feminine and happiness. So all these feminine values are becoming more prominent, and part of it has to do with the rise of women in society, finally, in this century. What Lynn Twist refers to as Sophia's century, when women finally are ascending to their rightful role in society after millennia of every societal institution being dominated by men. And we're starting to see that in part, women being empowered through education, where women now make up 58 to 60% of college students across all industrialized nations. Right? And women outnumbering men actually everywhere in the world except South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And women graduating at a higher rate and getting better grades. So every white collar profession is slowly but surely statistically being dominated by women. It's happening with doctors, with lawyers, with even professions like accounting and others, marketing, all of these kinds of things. And over time, then more women moving into leadership as well. Now, in the past, women who got to leadership, very few. So 25 years ago, there was only one woman running a Fortune 500 company. And that was Catherine.
And and I was reading actually a survey the other day that identified that there is a drop now in CEOs at a higher level. It seems that we ascended, we got to a certain level, and there is a significant drop in CEOs running these companies.
So the longer term trend is positive, but progress never happens in a straight line.
No.
It goes like this.
Exactly.
There's a period of consolidation and stepping back, and then the next phase. I do believe that is inevitable, that will happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the sheer numbers are going to dictate that, and all the research evidence. Catalyst.org collects all the studies that show the impact on the power of having more women on boards, having more women in executive roles and as CEOs. The impacts that has, not only on financial performance, but also in terms of sustainability, in terms of long-term stakeholder well-being, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things are, the evidence is very, very strong, and that will happen. I'm a strong believer in that. But the other side of that, we will have more women, but also, see, it's not just about men and women, as we talk about in the book, right? Shakti leadership is masculine, feminine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So men are perfectly capable of exhibiting the so-called feminine values. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
most of our conscious companies actually have male CEOs, but they're all very much integrated beings who are
Mm-hmm.
as comfortable talking about love and care and vulnerability and empathy and inclusiveness and all of that.
Yes. And if I may just make a little distinction here for our viewers who are maybe not so familiar with what we're talking about in terms of the reference to masculine and feminine. So masculine and feminine has nothing to do with men and women. It's an energy within that is existent in either gender, in either men or women. We all have feminine, masculine energy within. It has nothing to do with men or women being, but we have a predominant energy. As a woman, I have a predominant energy of feminine in me.
You do, but society, culturally, and for other reasons, the domination of the patriarchy has suppressed the feminine.
Correct.
Totally has suppressed women, right? And so women,
And the
when they
feminine qualities, yeah.
and the feminine qualities in men, when young boys are told not to show emotions, don't cry, be a man, and when you're 5 years old,
Yeah.
it causes a deep wounding, and sort of taking away
Mm-hmm.
the humanity of a lot of people, right? And when women do show up in leadership, in the past, 25 years ago, I said there's only one woman running a company. There were some women running countries, but who were there? There was Margaret Thatcher in England, and her nickname, if you remember, was the Iron Lady, right? And before that, we had
You
Golda
left quite a legacy.
Right, and Golda Meir in Israel was the original Iron Lady, right? So, and we had Indira Gandhi in India.
Mm-hmm.
She was known as the only man in her cabinet,
Oh, wow.
though she was the only woman, right? So the women had to be tougher than the toughest men. They had to be more aggressive, more brutal, more ruthless, right, to compensate for the fact that they were women. So the feminine was suppressed and locked up, even with women who rose to any level of authority and power, right? And I think all of that is starting to change.
Mm-hmm.
So, as Lindquist uses this metaphor that it's like the bird of humanity has been flying for millennia with one wing tied behind its back, the feminine wing.
It's exactly that, absolutely, and I believe as I have experienced personally, and this is why I started this work before even I met the sisters, my sisters in the Shakti leadership program. I started this quest 5 years ago, being fed up of having to fit into a man's description of how I should be showing up according to what they're expecting and according to what the conditioning in this world is all about. And as a result of doing that for years and years, and running my life as though I am a man and a woman all at once, but with the women's side being shunned and very diminished, I got to this point where I was just exhausted and angry and fed up and feeling so very small, when in fact inside I don't feel that I am small, but yet I felt like I had to somewhat reduce myself and shrink a little bit so that I could be fit in by the man around me, so I could be maybe included. It's not sustainable, and this is why it's so not sustainable. This is why there is a rise and a surge of anger in some women, which of course I'm not supporting, because I don't think that anger really does anything good unless eventually it's channeled in for better, for a greater meaning and a greater purpose. But I believe that all women in business feel that way. It's not sustainable. It has to change, and it's changing finally.
It is, and many men feel that way too. It's not like all men are happy. I mean, the patriarchy victimizes young boys and young men as much as you know.
Actually, if you could have a few words on that, I would love to hear from your perspective personally, and also the perspective that you've, I'm sure, been able to listen to from other men around you. What what are the pain points for men in leadership today?
Well, I think the expectation that you have to be ruthless, you have to be aggressive, you have to show up in a certain way, and you cannot show any signs of weakness defined as compassion, caring, empathy, vulnerability, etc. I think that when a model or definition of what a great leader looks like, I think causes a lot of harm. And they're not,
Mm-hmm.
there are a few men that fit that naturally or just because of their upbringing, but many don't, and they feel like they
Mm-hmm.
have to suppress their natural caring side in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it causes, as I said, this wounding in a child, when they are told that they need to suppress their
Mm-hmm.
own real human feelings and reactions. And that does show up as dysfunction later in life. The wounded inner child shows up as violence and aggression,
Mm-hmm.
later in life, unless you heal that.
Mm-hmm.
I think every tyrant you can go back in their childhood and see where those wounds were. So it victimizes men. I think women more so, but even boys and men are victimized by that.
Yeah, and I do believe that women right now are louder about how they have been victimized in this process. And yet I feel that, and this is an instinct, it is my own personal opinion, it's not based on any research or anything like that. But I tend to feel that men are quietly suffering as much, and yet because they've been told to suppress their emotions, and they tend to not work things out through talking and verbalizing things, generally I tend to believe that there is as much suffering from the men, yet we're not hearing it because they're not talking about it.
Yes, I think there's a very good documentary by Jennifer Siebel Newsom. I think it's called "The Mask We Live In" or something like
Yes,
that.
yes, I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard about it. I've heard it's very good.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely, I think this whole, because we've had the masculine and male domination for so long, the tendency
Mm-hmm.
is to want to swing to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's the women's turn. And I think what we recognize in Shakti, and all of us, I think, believe, is that it's not about that. It's not about men against women or men versus women in the battle of the sexes, and it's our turn for women to say that. It is really about coming together and men and women being for each other
Mm-hmm.
and helping each other cultivate that wholeness, right?
Absolutely. And
Then,
only when we are integrated inside can we actually bring to this world more integration on the outside.
right. And it's the masculine, feminine, but it's also Nilima's beautiful phrase that we all need to be wise fools of tough love.
Yes, I love that phrase. Yes.
It's the
And
tough
she,
and love, it's masculine, feminine, but it's also the wisdom and the foolishness. It's the elder energy and the child energy,
correct.
the parent and the child energy, as well as the masculine and the feminine all together in the healthy manifestations of all four of those.
Beautiful circle. Yes.
That's the whole person. Right?
And
And then,
so I want to switch to something that is pertaining to your new book, because it's 1:39 and I want to keep some time for the new book before we get to your most recent healing that I want to hear about, and your new book. I just want to also underline the book Shakti Leadership that you co-wrote with Nilima. Nilima being my teacher in this Shakti leadership program that is I highly recommend to anyone who wants to bring in more of the feminine within the leadership world of business, particularly in their lives. And so, moving on from that part of your life with Nilima and the Shakti Leadership book, and you are now just about to publish a new book, and you were referring to this new book work as healing. You are bringing healing through this work to the world, but you were referring to your own healing that you recently did, and I want to hear more about that.
yes, so as I started to think about this idea of business as a place of healing a few years ago, and the reason that happened was, again, kind of arrive at some things in a circuitous way. I have an acronym for most things in the Conscious Capitalism framework. So for purpose, the acronym is healing. Like every great purpose is a healing purpose. And that stands for the qualities. It's heroic, it's evolving, it's aligning, it's loving, it's inspiring, it's natural, it's galvanizing. Right? That's what defines a great purpose. But then as I thought more about that word healing, something just stuck with me. I said, there is so much suffering in the world still. I mean, we have less physical violence in the world today than we have ever had in the past. There are fewer wars and fewer murders and fewer terrorist incidents and all of that. All of that is down. Bullying is down. All these things are actually down. But psychic suffering is up and planetary suffering is up. Right? So there's a tremendous amount of stress in the world, anxiety, depression. If you look at all of those charts are going up. Suicide is up 25 to 30% in the US in the last 20 years or so, right? So there are signs of tremendous distress and stress in the world. So there's a lot of suffering, and of course we know what's happening to the planet. We know that what's happening to other species. We're living through the 6th mass extinction in the history of this planet, the first one caused by human activity, right? You know what happens in the factory farming system to all the animals and how they are tortured and abused. So there's a lot of suffering in the world, and there's suffering happening every day in businesses as well. So I started to really think about this and what's going on. Countries are divided, right? People are not talking to each other within families over political issues, over economic issues, etc. Just a tremendous amount of suffering that goes on. The need for healing feels very visceral to a lot right now. Level, physical healing, mental, emotional, spiritual, and planetary, natural, ecological healing. All of those are really, I think, to me, these are the meta purposes of our age. All of us need to be instruments of healing, and whatever we choose to do. You could be a lawyer and be part of healing. You could be a doctor.
Absolutely.
Whatever you do, you can do it in a way that reduces suffering.
Absolutely.
Brings more joy, right? And promotes healthy growth.
And first, the practice, though, of this type of healing, the practice of living in joy and living through a choice of not suffering is in itself a big decision that a lot of people don't even believe they have access to, and live life as a side effect, as we were talking about before.
Right. So part of it is how do we explain life to ourselves and how do we think about life? Right. That's kind of the mindfulness and consciousness. So we can help people. Right. We can help people through that, and then we can actually look at how we create suffering for each other in the workplace. Right. The toxic relationships that people have with their bosses and supervisors and managers. Nobody wants to be bossed, and nobody wants to be supervised and managed. Right? People want leadership, and they want to be valued and given the opportunity to do what they're able to. Right, so there's tremendous things that we can do in the workplace to reduce suffering and to actually elevate joy. For the workplace to become not like a prison, but feel like a playground. We come and we have joy and we create in community with each other, right, and do something meaningful together. And so the book is about 25 stories of companies that are bringing healing to work for their employees, for the families of their employees, for their customers, for their community, for the environment, and beyond, and doing it at bringing society together. So how can business be a place of healing for the people who work there? How can it be a source of healing for everybody it serves? How can it be a force for healing in society?
Tell us the title.
The Healing Organization, Awakening the Conscience of Business to Help Save the World. And as I embarked on this last year, and I also happened to be turning 60, and there are a number of other life changes that I'm also going through, sort of a transition point, and really caused me to step back and reflect, what my journey has been, and what do I do going forward. I had the opportunity.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So we had a, for example, when I turned 60, we were in the Himalayas and in the high mountains in Ladakh, right, at 20,000 feet, with a Shakti group actually, right. So we had 7-8 days of a lot of reflection, a lot of meditation, a lot of deep conversations around that. I also then, on the advice of Nilima and some others, I said I need to delay this book and experience more healing before I can write about it. So we had a silent retreat that I had been invited to, which I had said no, but then I said yes, in upstate New York for 4 days of total silence and community, with a sort of collective consciousness of a group of people in silence together. It's something powerful that seems to happen.
I agree.
Then I was invited to go to the Amazon rainforest with a group called the Pachamama Alliance, led by Lynn Twist, an amazing woman. And I had interviewed her for the book, and she said, Raj, you need to come on this trip if you're writing about healing, because you learn about our connection to nature and how that's part of the reason why we're all suffering is because we've disconnected ourselves.
So, what was very present personally for you in this healing process? What do you feel you had to heal?
I had to, first of all, heal myself and learn about my own, childhood and growing up and my relationship with my father and grandfather and my culture and other things that happened along the way, and learn not only how to accept and forgive, but actually how to be grateful for many of the experiences that I had, right? And be able to actually say, if that hadn't happened, I would not have had this awareness or be able to do this. Right? So I was able to kind of make sense of my whole life and see it as a culmination or as sort of a almost like a puzzle.
Ascension. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that all these things are building on each other and enabling me now to do things that are meaningful, not just to myself, but to many other people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That I'm kind of a messenger of things that are universal. As Nilima says, that which is deeply personal is also completely universal.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of shied away from being too personal in the past. Right?
As it is, well, it's also in line with a very masculine way to lead. Right. I mean, men tend to close their heart on to the rest of the world.
So the last 12 years or so has been about coming from a more heart-centered place. And this last year just intensified that. Like some of the shamans in Ecuador, when we were there, they said in the West, everybody operates from here, from your head, right? Everything's, and they said, we need to operate from here.
Absolutely.
Down your gut and your heart and all of that needs to be brought into all of that. And one of the things that I did realize as a final thought on this is, as a child of the patriarchy, I had spent maybe 40, 45 years trying to live up to my father's expectations, be worthy of him as a son and do what would make him proud. And all of that was futile because that was not me, right? Those did not come naturally to me. That was not my gift to bring. That's not my music to play. And then starting with Forms of Endearment, where that, the cover of that literally had a heart on it, right? And I was starting to tap into that side of human beings. And I literally had tears. I remember the day, June 5th, I think 2005, writing some of the stories in that book and being moved to tears because of the deep humanity that I was experiencing in these companies. And I said to my co-author in that writing retreat, David, I said, I think my purpose just found me. All these years I've been sort of, as Joseph Campbell said, following my heartbreak. What gives me
exactly. Yeah. If you don't know how to find your purpose, find your heartbreak.
Find your heartbreak and then follow your bliss, follow your heartbreak. Somewhere in there is your purpose. So I felt I found my purpose. And because it's writing about businesses that operate according to this other paradigm of love and care and meaning and purpose and inclusiveness, etc. And then everything that has followed has been in that vein. And that has actually connected me to my personal power. Because before that, I was just an academic trying to climb the
I love that. I was just an academic.
Yeah, just trying to observe and write and do things to build my career. But now everything I do is focused on the impact it has on practice and on other people, right? And only last year, one of the things I also did was started working with a coach for the first time. And she told me, do you realize that everything you've been doing since 2005, you have been honoring your mother? I said, I didn't. I never thought of it that way.
Wow.
And now I'm embodying her energy, because that's what's in me and that's what she gave me, right? And that's what has the power. That's where I can actually bring to the world, with some impact, right? Then she asked me, does your mother know that? And I said, no, because I didn't know it until 2 minutes ago, right? And she said, I want you to call her and tell her that. I said, no, that's awkward. In my family, we don't talk about these kinds of things, right? And my father is always sitting there and it's always on the speaker, so I don't want to do that. She said, no, I don't care.
To. I love her. I love your coach. That's a good coach. I don't care. Do it.
And I called her the next morning, and my father happened to be in the shower. So we had a conversation. I told her, and she just broke down in tears. She said, I had no idea.
Oh,
she said, she views herself, my father is this, PhD gold medalist, highly educated, and she was only educated till the 8th grade, right? Doesn't speak English very well. She always thought of herself as inferior and just there to help the family and take care of everybody, right? And that she doesn't really matter in the world. And I told her that what you taught me, has come through me to the world and has mattered more than anything else that I ever learned. she said, as I said, it was very healing for her and for me.
And for you. My God, how beautiful.
And
You
I
know,
think,
it's interesting. I had no idea of what you were going through, your healing and this journey. I met you in person at the Shakti retreat when we were in San Diego. And I must say, when I last saw you on our webinar recently, I've noticed a sense of joy and freedom in you that I hadn't noticed before, that comes through quite a bit. And I'm so happy for you because it's really obvious that it's like you've lifted some weight off your shoulders. Is that coming from also the forgiveness part that you've been able to experience with your father?
yes, and it's gone beyond forgiveness to acceptance, to understanding, to empathy.
Yeah.
Right. And he actually passed away about 3 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, yeah, but very peaceful transition in terms of the impact it had on me, because I had already come to a place of understanding and empathy towards him. Not blaming him, etc., but recognizing that he was a product of his upbringing, and he did what was programmed into him, and he was doing the best he thought, right? And that ultimately, I've come to realize is that if you bring that energy to your life experiences, right, where you not only accept them, right, but embrace them and be grateful for them, and then they can serve you. Then they can serve you. Otherwise, you're consumed with bitterness, like, why did my life have to be this, and why did I get a father like that? Why did all that happen, right? But when you look at it in a different way, it can actually serve you and enable you to actually grow from it. So at this point, I would say I choose it, and I'm grateful for it all, right?
Yeah.
One of the phrases that came to me in that silent retreat was that life is not a buffet, and it's and there's no menu that you can order off. You're given a tray full of stuff, okay, and you need all of it.
And it happens for us, not to us.
Exactly. So,
and that was a sentence that, to me, when I heard that sentence, it changed everything for me. And so besides that, and considering it as not a buffet, but I think that those are great tools to move forward in a more conscious and meaningful way. I'm so delighted that you were on today. Thank you so much for your joy that you brought to this moment, and all of the amazing feedback that you have to possibly direct and guide people on a more meaningful and conscious journey.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you for the work that you do through this podcast, and also what you're doing through the Shakti Fellowship.
Oh, it's such a relief. It feels like such a relief and a privilege and honor to be here, with you, to be here with my Shakti sisters, to do this work. It's my heart and my soul are in it. So thank you so much. Have an amazing time in Costa Rica. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. Thank you for taking the time away from your vacation to be here with us.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, Tatiana.
This was fun. It went so...
Yeah.